Hello! What you are currently looking at is the deconstructed version of the newest Sugar Drizzle Polish palette. I saw the color story and I was like, oh my gosh, that is my dream palette. All shimmer, all light and bright colors. And so I knew I wanted to purchase it. I hadn't purchased a palette from the brand before this, but if you know anything about me, you may know I don't like palettes. So as soon as I got it in my hands during the move, I deconstructed it and put it into a Z palette, and now it lives with the rest of my single eyeshadows. So I don't have the deconstructing footage to show you today since I did it while I was moving and didn't have access to all my filming stuff, but I figured I would go ahead and swatch out the colors in like color order so that way you can see the differences between the shadows, and maybe it can help you decide whether or not this is a palette you are interested in purchasing. So if you want to see some swatches of this palette that has been deconstructed, then go ahead and just keep on watching. So obviously, since I depotted the palette, I don't know what these shades are called anymore, but we're just gonna go ahead and get started with this beauty. This is a bright lime green. There's not really any shift in this one, but there is a lot of sparkle. It is a very opaque color, and there is, you know, a little bit of like a yellow kind of shift happening in it with that darker green base. Not the most revolutionary of all of the shades in here, but definitely a beautiful color. Next up, we've got this guy, which is the most satin of the bunch and may look unassuming, but there is quite a bit of shift happening in here. I think if I show you on my finger, you'll be able to see it best. So it's got that blue base, but there's like a pink and gold shift happening in there. It kind of reminds me of the lighter version of the shade Revenge from Shine by SD, or I think it's Lucid Lavender from Touch of Glam. Very, very pretty. I've used this one on the eyes and that dimension does show up, even though again, not the most sparkly shadow out of this palette, but very, very shifty for sure. Next, we've got this beauty. This one is a little bit chunkier in formula. It's like a dark purple base with like a warmer purpley pink shift to it. You can see very, very shiny, but definitely a little bit chunkier. But again, lots of dimension in this shade. I will do a few comparison swatches at the end if you're curious, but this one is pretty unique to me. Next, we've got another one that, like the green, is more of a just straight up shadow, if you will. It's like this warm purpley color, getting a little bit more pink, but I would argue still a purple with like a golden sparkle in it. Unlike the green though, which is more of a more metallic, this definitely has a lot of those really fine individual sparkles in it, although there's no problem with it looking patchy on the base as a result of that. Really, really beautiful. Even though it's unassuming and there's not a whole lot of shift happening in it, I find that I've used this one the most out of all of them. All right, now we're starting to get even more pink. I would still say this is like a warm purple, maybe a like magenta color, but definitely getting a little bit more pink. This one has pink sparkles as well, whereas this one has more of like a silver going on. So it's got less dimension in it, even more so than this one, but a really pretty color. And again, lots of fine sparkle in it, just not quite as, you know, dimensional as some of the others. Next one is another one that's more satiny. This is a very light pink with a blue shift. Because it's more satiny, it actually does work really well as a highlighting shade. Sometimes you don't want all of that texture along your brow bone or your inner corner. And so this one is really nice for that. but definitely a different texture than the rest of the shadow, even than this one, which I also said was a little bit more satiny. This is even more so. There's just a little bit less shine in it overall, but it makes it a nice pop for the inner corner. Now we are full-blown pink. This is a bright, like Barbie pink with a gold shift in it. Beautiful, beautiful color. You can see that shine is very intense on this one. Again, lots of fine sparkle, really a beautiful one. These two in formula are very, very similar. Next, we have what I would argue is like a multi-chrome in this palette. This to me reminds me a lot of Terra Moons and Terras. It's a pink with a very strong gold shift in it, but there is some teal on the edges there, and it is beautiful. So, I mean, this whole palette was $44, and in comparison, this one shadow, you know, the alternative to it is like about $13 from different brands. So, you know, if you don't have a shade like this palette may be worth it to you. But if you do already have this shade, I feel like this is what makes this palette a little bit more expensive, so it may not be worth it to you. It totally just depends. But you cannot deny it is beautiful. I feel like last but not least, we're kind of rounding out on a safer note in comparison to the last one I just swatched. This is more of a warm tone pink with, again, kind of a gold shift happening. Definitely much warmer than anything else we've got going on in this palette, but a whole lot of pinky purpleness happening here in this palette, which for me is great. These are my types of colors. It's what I prefer. But now that I have them lined out in color order after I've depotted them, it kind of does feel like there are a lot of similar shades. None of them are the same, right? They're not duping themselves. But on the eyes, I feel like some of these may be a little hard to distinguish from one another, but really high quality. I've enjoyed wearing these on the eyes. And now let's go ahead and do some comparison swatches. All right, so you can see we've kind of got some dupe piles going on, if you will. So let's just start here and kind of work our way through what we've got going on. So this is the shade from Sugar Drizzle. I'll put it in the middle. This is that one that's a little bit chunkier with the dark blue base and like the purple shift in it. I wanted to compare it to Necromancy from Copacetic Cosmetics. This is one of their like shifting shimmers. This one is a little bit darker and much more textured. It kind of is leaning on that flaky texture that Copacetic does, although it's not technically called that. But here it is in comparison, a little bit darker, but the same shift for sure, and a totally different texture. This one is from the Blend Bunny Surge palette, but I thought it might be similar, so I went ahead and pulled it out just in case you have that palette. Not as strong as of a shift in it and not as sparkly, but it definitely does have a similar base color, and it does have that like that pinky purple kind of shift in it, even though it's more of a satin finish. That Blend Bunny shadow did just stain my hand a little bit, but we're gonna ignore that and keep chugging along. So next up, we've got this one from the Sugar Drizzle palette. This is like that more purpley with a little bit of a gold, but it's getting kind of magenta-ish. So here it is. The only one that I really have that I thought I could compare it to is another shade I depotted. This is depotted from the It's Belle palette, the original Break the Rules palette. A little bit darker, but still has that kind of gold within it. So if you have this one, they're pretty similar, but definitely not the same. Next, we'll go ahead and do this green. This one was a little tough for me, actually. I said it was like, oh, this is a, you know, not anything crazy to write home about, but actually it is pretty unique for me. So I pulled out this one from Copacetic. This is the shade Flourish, but it doesn't have nearly as much of a base, and it's much sparklier in comparison to the metallic shade. So then, of all places, I went to ColourPop. This is from the Just My Luck monochromatic palette, but honestly, it's like the closest thing I have. So this one is a little bit more green, whereas this leans a little bit more acidic yellow. But out of everything, it's the closest dupe I have. So if you have that palette, this shade may not be as unique for your collection, although they definitely aren't the same. Next up, we've got this classic Barbie pink. And out of everything in my collection, I thought the closest dupe I have is this one from Lethal. It's the shade Evoke. Now, secretly, I don't love the Lethal Cosmetics shimmer formula. You can see it's not as sparkly. There is a shift in it, but this one is much shinier. So out of the two, I prefer this one. But there's something similar about them, definitely in that base color at least. So next we've got this one that is a very light pink with a blue shift. It's much more of a satin color. And I wanted to compare this to the shade Sugar Cube from Menagerie, from their newest like Fruit Bat collection. No, Sugar Glider, that's what it is, Sugar Glider. They are pretty similar to me. This one has more of a shift, but this one has a little bit more sparkle. But all in all, there's a similar vibe going on, at least with the light pink there is. Let's go ahead and do the last pink color last. So this one is that really like bright, warm pink. And the closest thing I could compare it to is that same It's Belle Break the Rules palette. This is depotted from that, but they're not the same. It just is the closest thing that I had. So if you happen to be curious about these two, here they are, but I know this is probably the worst comparison I've done so far. All right, so next we'll do the purple. I really like this one, like I mentioned before. Very, very pretty. We'll compare it to Synth from Lethal Cosmetics. Again, not my favorite formula, but I thought color-wise there's some similarity going on. This one has more of that blue shift and is a little bit deeper in the base, but definitely something kind of similar about them. The other one I have is Lavender from JD Glow. This is again deeper and a little bit more straight up metallic than this one, but here are all three in case you were curious. I feel like this one best exemplifies though what I mean about this palette from Sugar Drizzle just being lighter and brighter than a lot of what else is going on in the indie shadow game. Next, we'll do these pinks. So this is the one from the Sugar Drizzle palette. Again, a very, very beautiful color. Like I said, it reminds me of Terra Moons and Terra's. I think in Terra's might be a little bit warmer. Oh, for sure it is. But the shifts within it are very, very similar. I also pulled out Starlit from Terra Moons because I thought it may be a little bit cooler like this, but I think this one's a little bit too cool in comparison. It kind of falls right in between. And then the last one I have is the new $8 shadow from Amazon from Terra Moons, Aphelion. And this one actually might be the closest. It is, but it's got less shifts happening than the one from Sugar Drizzle. Now, I have a lot of other shades within this category, but I figured by swatching these three, one, I could compare Terra Moons to it, and two, if you've seen my dupe videos, you know kind of where the others fall. I didn't want to swatch like 10 million shadows like this on my arm, but hopefully this gives you an idea of like where in the spectrum it kind of falls with shades like these. Last but not least, we've got these blues. So this is the one from the Sugar Drizzle palette. I'll go ahead and swatch in the middle like I have been doing. And this is Revenge, which is more sparkly, but the shifts in it are quite similar. This one has a little bit less of that pink in it, but it is still there IRL. I know it's showing up more gold, but there is definitely something similar about these two. Now, is it as good as Revenge? No, but there's a similar vibe. This one is from Copacetic. This is Excellence. It's a little bit darker, so it's going to be even less like it, but I figured I would swatch it just in case. So here are all three of these together, and you can kind of see what I mean about this being the lighter version of these two shadows. All right, well, those were some swatches of the newest Sugar Drizzle Polish palette. I hope that the comparisons were helpful and just the swatches in general. Let me know if you've tried the palette. What are your thoughts about it? If you haven't tried it, like what are your favorite shades or what seems the most unique to you? And regardless, until I see you next time, I hope that you stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy. Bye!